Hello and welcome to Mettā Moments. This is Vincent, your host. Mettā Moments is a podcast series dedicated to exploring the practice of love and kindness meditation with practitioners. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Daniel Brottman. I started to follow Daniel on Twitter about a year and a half ago, where he shares extensively about his dharma love and his journey with meditation. He's a musician by trade, and today we had a candid conversation about Mettā, the brahmavihārās, and his personal experience with all that. So let's dive into this Mettā moments together with Daniel. Daniel, thank you for joining.
My pleasure.
It's so good to have you. Really appreciate you coming on Mettā moments.
Yeah, it's exciting to have an opportunity to just sit around and talk about Metta.
Yeah. Good. Well, I have known you for about a little bit more than a year, I think, following you on Twitter, and I've really enjoyed, following your adventures on retreats, your take on Dharma, and I've known that you're a Metta practitioner, although you've been practicing with other meditation techniques, and you're very experienced now. I was wondering, if this conversation we could focus on Metta and your work with Metta and the brahmavihārās. And I would love for you to introduce yourself for our viewers or listeners in whatever way you'd like.
Sure. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. So my name's Daniel. I first got interested in meditation and Buddhism a bit over 10 years ago, I would say. And was kind of starting touch and go for the first years, but in 2017, I attended a week-long retreat for the first time, which really planted a big seed of faith in the practice for me. And so my interest in Dharma kept deepening, and I was studying music, classical music, for these years still. So I started going on more retreats, had some plant medicine experiences, which I think were also very relevant to talking about heart practices, really showing me the heart in ways I hadn't seen before. And during when the pandemic started, I did a couple of retreats, mostly here in this room, where I practiced Metta all day. And that was kind of my first really, I had, tried a little Metta here and there before, but that was my first, higher dose kind of introduction to figuring out what is this practice. And I can talk more about those, but then, so a few years ago, I guess around 2020, 2021, I sort of let go of trying to create a classical music career and I had an open-ended sense of what my focus is, but that focus has looked a lot like Dharma increasingly. And so there's been some more retreats, including a couple multi-month retreats, one of which at the IMS, Insight Meditation Society. I also practiced a few weeks of Metta before kind of going insane and going back to Vipassana practice. We can talk about some of those difficulties, but also good things that also came from that period. I would say my practice of Metta is still developing. Earlier this year, I was at a journey retreat, which is Metta-based concentration practice, which also I think was helpful in my understanding of Metta practice. And I also think Metta, sometimes, like before this call, we sat down together for 4 minutes and did some, we're doing Metta practice now. And so I do that sometimes, but I also think that Metta practice is the cultivation of Metta is part of pretty much any kind of practice. And it's also part of the day, moving through the day practice. In some sense, it's like a very primary practice moving through the day. I mean, mindfulness and is there ill will here? Is there ill will towards me or towards others? And it's such a clear place suffering arises that it's really important place to be aware of.
Yeah. I thank you so much for sharing all of this, and totally agree with you. I think it never really dawned on me how metta should be or is more of a sort of a primary practice until I was listening to Robert Bea's Creative Samadhi, where he was, talking about the sense of well-being and everything. And I was like, well, that's just, metta meditation. And then, really after that, I just realized that, before I had been so solely focused on concentration that I was like, bringing my mind to like forcing a muscle that didn't need to be forced. Hmm. Can also really relate to your experience with plant medicine, opening the heart, giving you a new perspective on the somatic aspect of the heart, the energetic level. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Well, you've done a lot of work since 2017. What was that first retreat that you participated in? Was it at IMS as well, or was it another retreat?
It was at Spirit Rock in California. It was the
Mhm.
retreat for young adults, which is a really good. I mean, it was my first retreat, so I think it was a really good first retreat. But
Yeah.
I still think that with time that has gone by, it's just a week long. I mean, really 5 full days with a half day on either side. So um, it's funny, now that I've done my longest retreat was 84 days. 5 days seems like not that long, but also
Yeah.
it is kind of long. And somehow that 5 day retreat holds a big place in my story and memory and impact in my life, just as the 84-day retreat does.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 It's always surprising. Oh, go ahead.
I'm curious now, but yeah, I was just gonna say, Metta was actually I was introduced to Metta at that retreat. I'm remembering now, and it was a sort of big part of that retreat because
Uh,
um, I was introduced to the phrase "May I love and accept myself just as I am," and I actually worked with that phrase a lot on that retreat, and just noticed I was, how Metta does, you get more attuned to the ways in which there's ill will arising. So I noticed more the self-judgment and I would kind of meet it with that phrase. And yeah, so I guess it's been there since earlier than I recounted in my story, Metta practice.
yeah. Well, it's a great segue to the next question, but I was just going to say that I remember my first retreat and how it was a standard Goenka, and it
Uh-huh.
felt like I had spent 3 months there, And then as I continued further, with other silent, practice or retreats, it's you start to get used to it a little bit more. But yeah, the first time is like, whoa. Well, the next question that I wanted to ask, you sort of started to answer it, is, when did you hear first about Metta and the brahmavihārās? And I hear it's at that first retreat in Spirit Rock, and I was wondering how it first hit you, hearing about this practice and um, yeah.
Yeah. I may have heard of it earlier. I was really into the 10% Happier podcast, especially in the early years of my practice. So I probably heard about it through there at some point. Um, but I think it's not so easy it, for many people, for me, to kind of get a taste for what is it actually. Can be, especially if you're taught the phrases method, can feel very like kind of unnatural or forced or um yeah, so there's some experimenting. I'm remembering uh one sit that someone led on that retreat. Um it had kind of a compassion flavor, I think, and one of the other young adults on the retreat was crying in the hall, and, you know, sitting there like, okay, I'm not crying. I don't know what's going on here. Um, but I guess there was something to that phrase around acceptance that seems to captivate me because it felt very important.
Mhm.
Mm.
Was there anything else after that that kind of led you to more understanding of Metta and the brahmavihārās?
I think just um, kind of slowly, bit by bit, as my interests continued in practice, I would come across things like I remember sometime after that, I heard a talk from Jill Shepard. She has this way of describing the brahmavihārās like a diamond. So it starts with metta, and then when metta encounters suffering, it's compassion, and when metta encounters joy or good fortune, it's mudita. And then they kind of come together in acceptance of or allowing of all phenomena and all beings in equanimity. That was exciting. And read Sharon Salzberg's book on Metta and the brahmavihārās at some point. But then that first retreat that I actually focused on Metta entirely was a new step in seeing how much creativity there can be in Metta practice. And yeah.
Well, that's perfect. I wanted to ask you, how long did it take you before you truly felt sort of metta meditation, at the emotional level, at the physical level, somatic, and probably I would imagine that retreat was very, critical towards that.
Yeah, it was. And I also kind of feel like it's sort of this year that I've sort of been like, okay, I think I kind of get it now a little.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, I mean, it's not like I wasn't, that metta practice didn't help me on those first couple of retreats I did on it. And also the 3 weeks I spent at IMS doing metta, I can speak about that more too. But actually maybe that's a good time to do that, because I feel like I should do it at some point anyway. So does that sound good? Or
Yeah.
okay, so yeah, so when I was at IMS, what actually happened was I wasn't intending to do intensive metta practice, but I have tinnitus,
Yeah, I share that experience with you. Actually, send you a feedback about this as you were heading to IMS.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
forgot. It's hard
yeah,
to
yeah.
remember who says what. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, a lot of meditators do. A lot of people do. It's not just meditators. And it's one of those things where it was barely kind of on my radar, and then when it showed up,
Mm-hmm.
you
That's
start
all you can
realizing
hear.
it's part of something a lot of humans experience. So yeah, a week and a half or so into that retreat, the aversion like erupted, and I was
Yeah.
like really lost, didn't know. I thought I was gonna have to go home, like I was really suffering. And so my teachers recommended, well, maybe try something like metta. It's like these phrases can be the anchor. They're kind of more, as opposed to open awareness, it's really easy to get sucked into the aversion and the nature of metta or compassion practice. So I started kind of saying phrases all day out of desperation, because I was like, okay, I'm just going to say phrases all day. Maybe that'll be something. And then uh, I learned to work with the aversion of the tinnitus by just kind of noticing how strong it was. And throughout the day, the aversion to the aversion. And eventually I was able to kind of take some of the reactivity out of it. So even when the aversion was strong, I wasn't so trapped in the feeling that this is going to last forever. I knew like, okay, the aversion will go down sooner or later. And so that kind of depressurized that cycle. But by that time, I had been practicing metta all day for like 3 or 4 days already, and that's a lot of momentum. So I thought, okay, well, I guess keep going with metta. Maybe this is what's happening this retreat. I don't know. Um, and I was doing phrases style practice just like all day. And but I really had a lot of trouble with the hindrance of doubt,
Mm.
which my understanding or my definition, not even come up with it, but my understanding of that is the mind that can't commit to a course of action, the mind that is vacillating between don't know if I should do this, don't know if I should do that,
Right,
and
right.
there's so much uncertainty that I can't do something. I'm stuck. And what I found was in retrospect, I feel like the way I was practicing metta was very conducive for doubt to arise. in my mind, there are people who practice metta with the same instructions that I'll describe that I was doing
Yeah.
that works really well.
Yeah.
But the more choices that seem equally good, the the more avenues there are for this mind to get really wigged out
Yeah.
about is it
Yeah.
this one or this one. So, um, you know, uh, okay, is the attention on the sound of the phrases? Like when I get really lost,
Uh-huh.
am I
Uh-huh.
trying to make the feeling? No, you're not trying to make the feeling. It's okay if the feeling's not there. Okay, but it seems like it's better if the feeling is there, blah, blah, blah. Okay, should I do phrases for myself or should I do phrases for the benefactor? Is that the right benefactor or should I do a different benefactor? What about all beings? What about, it's just like, well, should I do this for 50
Yeah.
minutes and then switch to, it's just like, so you can see how I just uncorked the surface of my mind a little bit. All this doubt spills out. Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So again, it's not that there was not benefit to that time because I really did get a lot of momentum, and there were some times when there was a lot of concentration. Um, there were some openings where there was really deep, like, oh wow, this just like waterfall of metta just came out of nowhere and it's here for a while. And other times when like a lot of tenderness was being developed, a lot of compassion. Um, so it was far from a waste, but there did come a time. Part of my doubt also was like, should I be doing metta practice or should I go back to vipassana practice? And like, oh, that's just grass is greener thinking. You'll have doubt over there too. But eventually, it kind of became clear. I really am swimming upstream here, and
Yeah.
do better with a simpler practice. So
Wow.
I can continue the metta story, but I'm gonna pause.
No, this is great. Thank you so much. You actually answered, I was going to say, how did your practice evolve over time? So you've been describing a lot of that right now. And yeah, if you'd like to continue a little bit, I'm very open to hear more.
Great. Um, yeah. So I guess there's some. I mean, there's some people, yeah. I was gonna say, I guess there's some controversy about the Journey folks, but I gotta hand it to them. It was a great retreat that I attended. I don't know. I attended earlier this year in February, I think it was, a online retreat.
Yeah.
And I even emailed them beforehand. I was like, I don't know, like I've done Metta for weeks at
Mm.
IMS, great teachers, and like I'm not certain, is it really going to be worth it for me to do this 1 week online thing? And they said, well, we've had people like that before, and we think we have some interesting ideas. And they were also very generous and uh, uh, gave me some scholarship, which was really helpful, and also real demonstration of dana and metta in itself as well. Um, and so I thought, well, okay, I'll just go, and it's a week of retreat. It can't be bad. Um, and there's a real, well, a few things that were helpful about that retreat. There's a real emphasis on experimentation and finding your own way, which I like. Um, there's the main thing I think actually though um, is saying actually this is feelings meditation.
Mhm.
If phrases help you, okay, but the point is to find the pleasant feeling and stay
Yeah.
with that. And to me, that feels like practicing metta. That's I mean, it's almost a tautology, like
Right.
it's like that's what you're practicing. You're practicing you can maybe it's not a feeling, maybe it's an inclination or it's a view, um, it's an intention, or it's a wish. But for me, finding the embodied sense or like, um, so to put it into practical terms, I still use phrases a lot in my
Yeah.
practice, but my default like view of what is metta practice is no longer um, choose your phrases, keep saying your phrases, and see if you can harmonize with them somehow. It's find any way to find the heart's real wish
Yeah.
for well-being. Um, and so oftentimes phrases are kind of helpful, but I'm really not even so keyed into like the content of the words so
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
It's like they just kind of um, keep redirecting somehow.
Mm,
But if I'm feeling some kind of grumpiness or self-judgment or something, um, it's like my focus is on what's the nature of the heart right now. Can I meet the heart in a way that is authentic? Um, can I meet the heart in a way that is kind?
yeah.
So, even if there's anger or judgment present, um, there's like a way to harmonize with that. It's like meeting it with compassion or just like tenderness, just spaciousness. And so that feels like I'm actually practicing facility with my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And the phrases can be a tool to help that. Um, um, the smile, which is emphasized at Journey as well, coming from the um, tranquil wisdom people.
Right.
Um, Also, I found to be really helpful because there's something about finding like the minimum viable smile or even just like the energy of a smile.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, is there something authentic to smile here? Like what kind of um wideness? It's like weird. Maybe that's just part of being human. Like something about this kind of energy
Mm-hmm.
is like helpful in actually meeting places that are tight and cold and
Yeah.
frozen.
Yeah, it's
Um,
almost like you don't really need to even have a physical smile. It's like you're putting a smile in your heart, right?
yeah.
A smile in your face. I liked Tara Brach when she used to say, or she probably does still, but I used to listen to a lot of her meditation practice
Mhm.
for a number of years. That the smile is in the sky, right? You just bring it to the sky, and I just love that. Yeah. What you're describing is it's really all the perspective and nuances of metta practice that I find so fascinating. I remember Joseph Goldstein in I think it was him in an interview talking about using the image, using the phrases and connecting that to the support of the feeling and bringing all those together to sort of weave them together. And yeah, so I really love everything that you're bringing to this conversation right now because I think for a lot of people, as for you at the beginning and for me at the beginning, that's not something that sinks in. You have to do a lot of trial and errors before you get there. Mm,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So I wonder if you could describe what was the impact or what is the impact of metta meditation on your life? And perhaps we can take it two ways, what was sort of expected and what is maybe unexpected in a way. And I don't know if you have any example of that, but wondering where that could lead us.
Hmm. Um, One thing that's coming to mind is just how it becomes a kind of default orientation. Um, I once had the opportunity, Joseph Goldstein visited IMS while we were on retreats, and there was like you could write in questions, and I had just like started doing metta practice, and so I wrote, um, "What is your favorite thing about metta practice?" And he started with that question. He liked it so much.
Awesome.
So it's like, yes. Um, but this is what he said. He said it's a way of life. My favorite thing is that it's not just a practice, it's a way of life. And yeah, I guess what's coming to mind is what's coming to mind is actually my work. I work at uh not for much longer, but I work at this church where I play music.
Yeah.
Uh, and I like getting to play music. They're really nice people. and it's my job, and I wouldn't do it if I didn't need money. Um, and but uh, it's like there's such um, it's not even usually like I'm setting an intention, like really consciously. It's more of just part of my general intention. How I show up is like
Mm.
I like sense the interiority and richness of these people and how real their joys and sufferings are. And I guess I'm thinking of my job because these are people who um I have to go slightly out of my way to do that because it's not like my tribe, like this is happening at Vibe Camp too, this is happening everywhere. Um um but or uh um it's really like now I'm thinking like, you're on a road trip and you stop at a gas station or something and you get a coffee from the clerk and like there's such rich opportunity to just exude metta and like not in any kind of like showy overbearing way, but just like actually it can be very subtle, but just like um a genuine thank you, a genuine smile, a genuine thought of like here's a whole person going through their day. And like I was at a Subway on a road trip recently and I asked about like, oh, they were out of this bread and they were also out of something else. And I was like, wow, they're like really not taking care of you. And she was like, yeah, So it provides like as a way of life, as a framework, it just opens up so much more opportunity for connection, I think.
Yeah. And we're such, herd animals, right? We're connected people. Connection means a lot. And I love what you describe about the richness of the interior of those, the realness of their experience. This is such a beautiful way. I've noticed myself, going about, doing my groceries or things like that in a very different way since I've taken that practice where,
Yeah.
I just love to note the name of people and call them by their name and just really genuinely, connect with them. And sometimes you realize that people don't want to connect with you, and that's okay. It's not about being obnoxious, but it's about really connecting in a real way, and you can sense that. I love that, and it brings so much. It's also very um, self-serving in that way because this connection just brings a lot to your heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Any unexpected thing that happened with your meta practice?
Hmm. Um, what came to mind just then was just an experience I had while practicing at IMS, and I was um, sending or I was saying phrases for a friend and mentor, and I just had this kind of opening where I just saw like, oh, like I could just love him, like it's so simple, or it's like a child, I could just boom, and then there was this huge just kind of like laser beam of love just kind of emitting for a while. It was kind of surprising. Yeah, I don't know about in terms of like effects in my life. Um, well, you know what? It's when mentioned this briefly earlier, but it's uh, one of the neat things about metta is how it highlights when the lack of metta is there.
Mm, mm,
Um, so that's been surprising at times, and it's I think it was on one of the retreats I did here at home where I was practicing metta, and then I was having dinner and lunch and was doing the dishes. Uh, and all of a sudden, I noticed that in my body, in my arm, as it was moving across the plate, there was this aggression. There was this like God, I gotta get done with this dishes, like very habitual, not used to
Yeah.
kind of hating doing dishes and treating it as like a, this sucks, this doesn't matter, just getting through this. And so surprising that like, whoa, there's all this pain in the heart that I'm just totally not aware of.
Yeah.
And I don't have the backdrop of metta to compare it to.
Yeah.
Um, so that's always really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think this is also an insight that came to me. There was Metta May recently, so I, took on the challenge and practiced every day. And then, after that, I switched back to maybe 3, 4 times a week, and then just that. I'm like, oh wow, that's a really big difference
Mhm.
between
Mm.
the two. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. It is kind of hard. I find it kind of hard to like make it a to not just informal metta as part of my regular
Uh-huh.
practice, but do actually dedicated metta practice regularly.
Mhm.
Um, doesn't never seems to stick. So I like the idea of metta may.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was really fun. That was the first time that I was really dedicating it. So really good stuff. You were describing a moment that you had at this retreat, opening your heart to this person, where you had, previously, just realizing that for some reason, your heart had maybe just habitually closed, and you realized, oh, I can just love this person. That
Yeah.
seemed like a memorable, sort of moment or insight. Was there any other sort of moment like that that sort of unfolded for you, an experience that sort of arise from practicing metta, on retreat or outside of retreat?
Yeah. Hmm. I remember one retreat at IMS. This might have been when I was there for 3 weeks, where I was doing some metta and kind of found myself in this like an altered state. It was like, oh my God, there's so much compassion. Like as soon as there's some kind of internal hurt, just this compassion just rushes in, and thinking like, oh, this is great. I'll just get myself here all the time, and then I'll I'll just meditate from here. And it turns out that, those kinds of conditions are more finicky.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Flush back. But it was nevertheless, um, I think those things, obviously there's a trap in having an amazing meditation experience, and then trying to make it happen again. But also it's part of the North Star developing. Oh, that's what the heart is
Mm,
like.
mhm,
I was going to say earlier when we were talking a little bit more about like finding the actual sense of metta any way you can do it. Part of the reason it's hard to just say that as an instruction is it's taken time to learn what that frequency really is.
mhm, mhm.
And so I think, some of these big experiences are part of what helps set that North Star. They're not the only thing. I think that the daily just feeling around in the dark and is it over here? Oh, it's a little bit more over there, that's part of finding it as well. But some of those experiences help. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, there were good experiences with Metta on the journey retreat, and the way that practice goes, it kind of really heading in a very energizing PT type direction, huge
Mm.
smile kind of feelings like that. Um, and then also on this 2 month retreat I was just at in California recently, um, went through lots of difficulty, and Metta wasn't my main practice day in and day out for any part of this retreat, but there were a lot of times when, have a really hard morning and go eat lunch and then lay in bed for an hour and just really tune into the heart. Maybe use some phrases. Maybe it was a very small sangha. There were 12 of us practicing there, so I would even just like this person, may they be, just go person by person. It's sometimes a really beautiful way, the people in your immediate vicinity, to cultivate metta in all beings. And it's a really good solve. Sometimes it can be very soothing when there's a lot of suffering.
I really like what you described earlier about, those insight that come and they're fleeting, and I've, definitely had the same experience. You're immediately like, treated with something and you're grasping onto it, so you have to avoid the trap of grasping and clinging. But then now you can use it as your sort of true north. Now you know what it feels like, and you can, find your way back to it. And the more you do that, the more, you sort of attune to that frequency, to that. Yeah, I find this a beautiful insight. Yeah, that's awesome. I wonder if you have you could share what phrases or image work for you the best.
Yeah. Um, my go-to is the pretty standard, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be safe, may I live with ease.
Hmm.
Um, and like I was talking about doubt earlier, there's been lots of doubt about, oh, these feel mechanical or these feel inauthentic or um um but I don't know, they seem to work.
Yeah.
And they're good, they're real. And like I was saying too, it's like um getting too tied up in like the meaning of the words
Hmm.
seems to not be the way for me to like find the heart. So in a sense, it doesn't matter so much. So that or I really like using all beings at times.
Yeah.
Um, I find that to be kind of uncomplicated in a way that's easier to tune into. Um, may all beings be well, may all beings be happy. Um, and then sometimes I like this phrase I mentioned earlier, may I love and accept myself just as I am.
Mm.
Um, I learned a great compassion set of phrases that comes from Jill Shepherd. She says, um, I'm aware of this pain or this suffering. I care about this pain. May it release. May I know peace. It's also nice because it rhymes and you can just say aware, care, release, peace.
Yeah.
Um,
That's beautiful.
yeah. But images are helpful too.
Hmm.
Sometimes more helpful. Like imagining a friend smiling or even things like this is one that came from my practice with Journey is like a friend and like imagining like hugging her, holding her hand or something, and this like energy like streaming from me into her and like lighting her
Hmm.
up. Um, um, or um, or like a memory of like my sister lives on the other side of the continent and seeing her after a long trip and the hug she gives me, something like that. Um, those kinds of, I think Judah, my teacher from Journey, calls that scaffolding. It's like you can get a little bit lost when things are really kind of uh, more story. There's more story in them. Um, you know, so if you stay there, you can be kind of like trying to juice them or like trying to, you can get more thinking. Um, but some of it can be really helpful in just like arousing the sense, the
Yeah.
general area. Um, I also really find hand on the heart super
Yeah.
supportive. One hand, both hands, compassion. Sometimes I put my hand on my back like this.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, hand on the heart is I strongly recommend anyone who hasn't tried it or thinks it sounds hokey or something, give it a try.
Oh, this is great. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful insight. I'll definitely try that. I
Oh
usually
yeah.
do it outside of meditation, but yeah, I think that would work.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking that too. I do it a lot. Um, yeah, just walking around, but sometimes during practice too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lying down is really good for metta practice, I find. I mean, I've done plenty of it sitting or walking things too, but um, um, people tend to say it's important for the body to be comfortable. And that's what I've found.
Yeah, I agree. I really like that idea of scaffolding. Yeah, definitely, when you start to find almost this pipeline of exponential, feeling and energy that just comes in and being aroused. It's a beautiful feeling because there's suddenly no limit, to how much you can feel. And it comes a lot with relaxing, of course, but yeah, images, all kinds of things can help. Is there anything else that you feel is unique to your practice that you haven't heard from or haven't heard often about?
Hmm. I'm not sure actually. Probably, but nothing clear coming to mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Something you said earlier, coming from Jill Shepherd, was this diamond approach to seeing the different virtues of the brahmavihārās, and I really enjoyed hearing that because I often try to find ways to, combine them or how can they help each other, and I wonder how do you weave this other virtues of the brahmavihārās in your own practice? Is there, anything you can describe that, came from your practice?
Yeah, yeah. I think compassion is the one that comes up the most because there's just so often suffering present. And some people I've heard talk about you can practice the Brahma Viharas in like a very kind of um like really like a yogic in the sense of like stretching your
Uh-huh.
capacity or like surgical way where it's like, okay, there's suffering here, but I'm really tuning into the frequency of metta.
Mhm.
And that makes sense. It's interesting. For me, maybe this is just where I'm at as a practitioner. If there's suffering here, I'm just trying to find the heart any way I can.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go to compassion.
Uh,
and and uh and and that doesn't even necessarily mean I'm like, I'm going to use my compassion phrases now. Like, I'll just use the same old phrases. They're just kind of going, but I'm meeting what's here.
mhm.
Um, and and then sometimes, I might be able to, be with my closed, suffering heart for a while in a place of compassion, and it just kind of naturally morphs, and it's not suffering as much. And then the same phrases are still going, and it's a bit of a different quality of heart that's here now. Now it's more metta. Um, um, and I think like the example I shared a minute ago of like um, picturing a friend with like a huge smile on their face, that's kind of more mudita flavor. It's like
Mhm.
I'm picturing them being so happy and I'm so happy for them. So um, yeah, I'm not sure. You can use specific phrases if you want to like really try and dial into that frequency, like may your joy ever grow, may your
Yeah.
joy continue and continue. Um, and then equanimity shows up in a lot of different ways. And I've heard the distinction that equanimity as a brahmavihara, say, is a different thing than equanimity specifically as like a awakening factor, which is like
Mhm.
equanimity to all sensations. Whereas the brahmaviharas always have this relational quality, even if
Yeah.
that's self-relational.
Mhm.
Um, so I really haven't explored much. I think I'd maybe sat in one guided sit someone offered about like picturing another being and um, you know uh, it's good to kind of balance, include metta as well, so the equanimity doesn't tip into the near enemy of um, what's the word, like not caring,
Yeah. Detachment or no.
difference,
Mm. But I see
something.
what you're saying. Yeah.
So like I care about you. I wish for you to be well, and I know that your choices are your own. Your karma is your own.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. It's almost like there's a sort of contemplation and an understanding of, of causality of karma, right?
Yeah.
Like you're accepting that things are already on their way, right? So you can offer compassion and you can offer, empathetic joy. And at the same time, there's the acceptance, the okayness, that confidence that things are yeah, I don't know how to explain that. Does this ring a bell for you?
Yeah. I'm feeling like I said, maybe I haven't explored this one as
Mhm.
much in terms of as a brahmavihāra. Um, I've heard I forget whose phrase this is, but there's, metta, the love that wishes well, and then
Yeah.
compassion, the love that acts, mudita, the love that celebrates, and
uh,
equanimity, the love that allows.
yeah.
So
It's such yeah. What did you say?
I said, if that helps anyone, that's a
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's such an interesting and rich topic for me. I recently did a Saturday night Mettā, the that Tashin does. So I covered for him one night, and I've been really working on trying to find how to guide people into weaving the brahmavihārās together. And I think the what we're talking about right now, this uh, quality of equanimity that comes as a result of weaving in metta and compassion and empathetic joy, and it's almost like it just comes at that diamond shape you were describing earlier, and then you have this beautiful okayness of avalokiteshvara, just regarding all beings equally and just loving them, and but at the same time accepting um, all seeing as they are. Uh, and I would love to continue to practice uh, this pointing instructions because I think that's a really beautiful thing. Hmm, wonderful. Well, thank you. Um, and maybe you can share a little bit about some of the difficulties that you've experienced in practicing metta. You've shared already about it, but I wonder more about how you were able to meet them. And I heard already that you met them with compassion.
Mm.
But I wonder if there's anything else you could describe here.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And perhaps to frame this a little bit further, is there anything that you could recommend people who are struggling with this practice based on your experience?
Um, yeah, so I mentioned the all the doubt that I ran into. The solution ended up being stepping away from the practice for a bit, coming back to it in another way at a later time. Another thing that's coming to mind was practice here. Maybe this is something unique, something I kind of developed on retreat, um, where just kind of another way in retrospect feels like it was another way of trying to find that heart frequency or that,
Mhm.
that feeling. Um, where I noticed, let's see if I can remember the words I used, where I noticed what I needed were these qualities. And so rather than the phrases I had been using, um, I think I might have said soft, gentle, kind,
Hmm.
kind, and used that as my pointers, my phrases to return to, um, as a way of just reminding myself breath by breath what the kind of energy um, that would be helpful as an antidote to the kind of striving, the kind of struggling that I
Hmm.
was running into in the practice. Yeah. Um, so I mean, I really think it's good to experiment with metta practice and all practice. Um, um, I really think whether you're using phrases or images, I mean, as you know, the Buddha didn't teach with phrases, so it's not like they're a necessary component. but I feel like finding this, like, another way of thinking about it is like trying to meet myself really honestly right now. It's like, what's
Yeah.
preventing myself from meeting myself honestly here? Um, so it's okay for it to be more um, exploratory, and even for some discursive thought to come in. I mean, that opens the door for too much discursive thought coming in, and that's natural. But then you learn, okay, that's too much thinking, but a little bit of thinking or trying something might be helpful. Um, yeah, and then, people often say how it can feel like a purification practice. So in trying to love myself, I notice all this self-hatred coming up. Um, yeah, it's hard. Compassion, surrendering. This is, wow, this is what it's like right now. Like right now, it is like this. And seeing the suffering clearly is a really good condition for the arising of compassion.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, that's real. Thank you for sharing. Beautiful. Well, I got so much from this conversation, Danielle, and I think we're gonna come to a close very soon. But I wonder if there's anything that you'd like to share about Metta, the brahmavihārās.
Hmm. Um, One thing that's coming to mind feels important that people do say, but just since it hasn't been touched on, I think specifically in our conversation is um, uh, the littlest little movement in the direction of love in any of these flavors counts and is progress.
Mm.
Um, so that can be hard to trust. So,
Yeah.
but in retrospect, it feels clear, I think. So I think that's a good thing to share. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of beginners have probably asked themselves the question, I don't feel anything. Why am I doing this right now? It doesn't work for me, right? Where actually what I really liked Robert Bea when he said, you're just planting the seeds, planting the seeds, planting the seeds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one more thought just came up for me, which we also mentioned earlier briefly, but you don't have to be like doing metta practice to be
Mhm.
actually cultivating metta.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know what I do. When I sit down, I usually don't have a plan. I just sit.
Uh-huh.
Um, but it's, it's like how I mentioned, it's like I just go through my day, and it's just part of my frame seeing the world is like, how can I view people with goodwill? Part of my sitting practice is just trying to view myself with goodwill, whether or not I'm using these like techniques that are metta techniques. Um, so I think it's um, yeah, it's a helpful component of any practice.
Mhm. Great, thank you. And what's coming up for you? Are you so you're preparing for some new things in your life?
Yeah. So this is my last month in this room, which has been my bedroom since 2019. I'm leaving this apartment, leaving my job here. I'm heading first to a month of practice at Zen Mountain Monastery in New York.
Mhm.
Uh, and after that, I don't know. I might stay there longer. I might travel around the country, visit friends, and see other monasteries. So yeah, don't know what I'm doing, but I'm continuing to try.
Yeah. Well, that is so cool. I wish you well on your next chapter, and I'm going to continue to follow you in any regards. But for now, I really appreciate you coming on this meta moment with me, and yeah, thank you, Danielle.
My pleasure, Vincent. Metta moments. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
May all beings be happy.